Hello, everyone, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today, I have one of the hosts and producers of Inside the Arthouse, Raphael Sbarge on. Ralph, I know you've had quite a quite a eventful last week with the LA fires. How you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I live on the East Coast now, but I'm back and forth to California a lot, and I lived there for a whole bunch of years, and I can tell you is that it's pretty brutal, honestly. I have so many friends who've lost so much, pretty much everything.
Wow.
And everyone has been affected in some way or other. It's been really astounding. Honestly, I don't know what other word to sort of say, but I have family there, so I'm checking in all the time.
It's a lot. I got some family there as well, and they had to like go to Paso Robles where their family is to escape the fires themselves. It's crazy. How do you
Yeah,
think these fires are going to affect the film industry?
it's a good question. I mean, I've been asking the same thing. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of, film production in Los Angeles is down. I mean, we knew from the pandemic and then the strike. Tax breaks have popped up everywhere, including Chicago, obviously, but New York and Atlanta and then abroad because of the strike. A lot of companies have decided to sort of take production overseas. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what happens and how this rolls out. It's not great timing considering the fact is everyone's trying to get back to normal. Uh,
Yeah,
it's going to be tough.
yeah, especially with the Oscars around the corner. God only knows how they're going to manage that. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'll just start off with my first question. How did you come up with the concept for Inside the Art House? What was the kernel to bring this show to life?
Yeah. So the oh, I'm going to sneeze. Pardon me.
It's okay.
Um, I made a documentary film called Only in Theaters, and the film really tracked this family, this remarkable family, the Lemley family, who runs a chain of theaters in Los Angeles. The Lemley theaters are revered. The family has been doing this for almost 100 years, and the original Lemley is named Carl Lemley, who founded a little movie studio called Universal Pictures, and is one of the original moguls of Hollywood. This is a family that is really, movie theater royalty. And I made a documentary. It's now on Amazon, but we had a theatrical run. We played 100, theaters around the country, and it critically was a huge success. It did very well, but from that, the subject of the documentary was Greg Lumley, and he is the CEO. He is the beating heart of the Lumley Theaters now. And I approached him after several years of making this film. We still liked each other, which is saying a lot, and because we've been through quite a bit. And the uh, I said to Greg, "What do you think about doing some kind of a talk show or something that we can really sort of leverage this movie theater's legacy, which is in this case about supporting independent, foreign, and documentary film, and really sort of giving filmmakers a platform to really amplify their run in theaters, and that's how this kind of came about.
Wow. So who I gotta ask, like, who does the editing on your show, or who splits the time between that? Because it looks like you do a lot. Because I see you guys talking to a big screen, and there's a face on there, and as someone who like does a lot of editing, I kind of thought, oh, are they putting that in post, or how are they doing that? So, how do you
Yeah, so
put
basically, I mean, it is. I mean, the popular parlance of right now is that it's a podcast, right? But we are a video podcast, and it's shot at the Royal Theater, which is a 100-year-old theater. We have a sort of elaborate setup, which is a four-camera setup. And I should mention, it's important to mention that Thomas Cassetta and Miles McCreary, who are both work on a rather one of the more popular podcasts called Flagrant. They came in as supervising producers and helped us really kind of create what is essentially the kind of the look of this. Greg and I had talked about how we wanted to sort of really do this in a theater because it is a subliminal uh, message of get to a theater, go see movies in theaters, right? And that's really kind of that's really what, we both so passionately believe in, and feel so important to be able to kind of really continue to remind people to go see movies in theaters. And that's where, that's where the magic happens. But what we do is all four cameras. Basically, we've got one on either Greg and I as the co-hosts, one back on us from the screen, and one onto the screen. If the guest is in person, we are able to use the screen for clips. If the guest is not in person, and oftentimes directors are international or they are on their press tour, what we've been able to do is figure out a way to use Riverside, which is sort of a broadcast version of Zoom, and we're able to kind of patch them in. So they see us in the theater and we see them, and then we're able to lay them in. That is the image of them on the screen. As we cut it together. But we in the theater are live interacting with them on Riverside, and it's technically quite complex. Children don't try this at home. Well, I couldn't have figured it out, but Thomas and Miles are really smart and capable fellows, and kind of navigated kind of setting this all up for us.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching because when I'm watching this, I'm like, that's got to be a lot of work, because you see most podcasts, including mine, it's like usually just someone with a webcam, or sometimes I shoot inside the bar that you see in the background here, because
Yeah,
we mix bars and movie theaters. Because what's a better place to talk about movies than when because there's so many times I've been sitting in the bar and someone brings up a film, and I tell them, "Oh, I'm a critic," and all of a sudden they light up and they're like, "You're a critic? What do you think of this movie? What do you think of that movie?" And yeah, it's pretty it's a process, but it's a rewarding one when you actually get higher production value out there. Uh,
yeah. I mean, we because it's Greg Lemley, look, you know this, and I'm relative. I mean, I've been guests on lots and lots of podcasts, but I've never produced one. The catch 22 of any sort of tricky podcast is that sorry, my phone rang there for a second.
that's okay.
Is how do you get guests if you don't have views, and how do you get
Hmm.
views if you don't have guests? And
Yeah.
it's a catch 22. In this particular case, what's been terrific is that because it's Greg Lemley and everyone wants to play their movies at his chain, as well as the fact that he's again so revered for his years of kind of really working with filmmakers and really helping filmmakers get a leg up. People have really sort of been eager to talk to him. So we've had some remarkable guests, and our thought is to try to create a an amp an amplification of smaller films. I mean, my film, for example, having had firsthand experience with this, I didn't have a Netflix, marketing budget or a Nat Geo budget.
Hmm.
It was a small film, and we did a lot. But at the end of the day, um, finding ways to break through the noise is so important, and that's what the intent of this is to try and do something with high production values that really complements these remarkable films with, I mean, for example, we did an interview with a filmmaker named Sandy Dubowski. He's got a gorgeous documentary right now
Hmm.
called Sabbath Queen. Sandy spent 21 years making this movie. There's, another gorgeous movie that's in theaters right now called Vermilio. We spoke with the director, Mauro del Perro, and she spent 5 years working on it. 12 years, is not is not a long time for many of these filmmakers who've really put their life and their soul into it. And that moment, that apex moment where it hits kind of the public view, how do you get seen? How do you get people to come to theaters? And that is really truly what this is about. It's really about supporting filmmakers and getting their vision out there.
Yeah, because I know this show is filmed inside the theater, and it really brings a personality to it that I really like. Most shows are people sitting in a non-theater setting, but yeah, one interview that really kind of stood out to me as I was watching the interview with I think he was the founder for Slamdance, Dan Mervish,
Yeah.
and One thing I remember is Robert Redford called him a parasite. Uh, uh,
It's a great story because he really is part of kind of the American independent kind of filmmaking movement in a way. And at the time, 30 years ago, what was clear was if your film was going to make it at all, you had to get into Sundance. That
mm,
was the only game in town. That was it. And if distributors might be interested, but if you didn't get into Sundance, you were pretty much SOL. So
mm.
what he did with a bunch of other kind of renegade filmmakers was start his own film festival called Slam Dance. And Slam Dance is now 30 years old and has launched the careers of a ton of other folks. But, Redford, I guess when they started this, referred to him as a parasite, and apparently he wears that as a badge of honor.
Yeah, I would too. I'd be like, Robert Redford is obviously noticing my program, and like good or bad, I'll take it. But what's your favorite happenstance story that you've gotten from a guest? I mean, circling back to Dan's thing, like he had only one person show up to one of his movies, and it was like in the morning or something like that. And they thought, oh no, it's only one person, but it turned out that person was the writer of something like the Sunset Times,
Yeah.
and he ended up giving like a lot of praise to that film. Can you talk more about like one of those stories that you ran across and you just thought, man, I'm not gonna forget this one?
God, there's so many. I mean, there's a wonderful film called Hundreds of Beavers, which is now kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
I guess, uh, there are people running to make movies because this movie essentially got made. They shot it literally in Minnesota in the winter. The actor who was also kind of one of the producers got frostbite. It was this great. I think they spent like I don't know, 70, $80,000 to make this wacky black and white movie, silent movie with kind of weird kind of graphics. And you know, apparently after they started shooting it, the director spent literally 2 years in his at his kitchen table doing all the kind of the wild kind of vis effects things. And now this film has made over $500,000. Sorry,
Wow.
over $500,000 and counting. And the reason why that's distinctive is because it's on streaming, but it's still making huge profits by packing people into theaters. And this is a guy with a vision and a point of view and a kind of all the distributors didn't want to pick it up. He ended up self-distributing it, and he's done an amazing job.
Yeah, yeah, I remember I saw that film and I knew immediately after I saw it, it's like, oh man, people will look because it's like a live action Looney Tunes,
Right.
but in black and white, and it works so well. The only part of that film that I thought was a little flawed is like it didn't really start any real story until like the last 30 minutes into the film. But even so, it's just so much fun. Like you kind of forget about that.
Yeah, it's goofy, and it's not like any other movie you've ever seen.
No, it's really not. When you think of the art house, what does it mean to you?
Art house it's an interesting term because it can be somewhat subjective, obviously based upon who is talking about it. But this at this point, you could sort of say art house are all the films without people in superhero costumes. Um,
Hmm.
they are non-studio related films, and they are generally sort of either self-funded or sort of patched together funded, or even if they are independently funded, they're smaller films with um, kind of a vision outside of the commercial world. What I can say, which is, I mean, look, we're all thrilled that obviously people are coming back to theaters, that there have been some amazing box office numbers from Moana and on and on. And these kinds of films have actually packed people back into theaters because everyone was talking about, oh, after COVID, movie theaters are dead. That's clearly not the
Uh,
case. Movie theaters are doing just fine. But these smaller movies, these smaller independent documentary and foreign films are honestly where the cool kids are. I mean, they
mm,
are the most interesting. films that really engage your heart and your mind. They don't just sort of kind of wax over you in a way that kind of just sort of gets you to a place where you're just kind of, oh, I've seen it before, I know it's coming, or you're just going from explosion to explosion. These are films that actually sort of take you on a journey generally, and are more inherently thoughtful, beautifully shot and beautifully conceived, and sort of work outside the kind of mold, of what is, I guess, kind of classic formatting of a Hollywood story. And because of that, if you like movies, honestly, the most exciting place to be is in the art house.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah, it is. There's so much more variety in the art house than what you get with typical films, because most movies follow kind of like a similar three act structure, as we all know, and the art house films kind of like to mix that up and do their own thing and be a form of expression. Like I think if it weren't for like the midnight movies, for instance, you wouldn't have gotten David Lynch because Eraserhead was
Just was gonna say,
playing, yeah. And because Eraserhead was playing at midnight, and people were like, "What the hell is this film? I gotta see it." I mean, my introduction to it was I was watching a documentary. Uh, I think about art house films like around the '70s era when it was real popular with, people seeing midnight movies, going to Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then Eraserhead came up. And right before I saw Eraserhead, I saw Elephant Man. That was my first David Lynch film. And I'm like,
uh,
who is this guy? And then once I saw the images to Eraserhead, I'm like, oh, there really isn't anyone like this person. This is incredible.
this guy.
And yeah, I mean, God, what a loss we had losing David Lynch because we're never gonna get anyone like him. Nobody thinks quite like him, and I think he works so well because he's so unapologetically himself. He's not he's sort of like his own brand and institution, and something we're not gonna have again. But I mean, thank God for the indie house, for the art house, or else we would have never had gotten to know filmmakers like him.
Yeah, no, that's dead right. And I, if you're bored with what's out there, like God, there's nothing to watch, or there's no interesting movies. I mean, right now, because of the Oscar race and because of all the award season, the most interesting films get released. But throughout the year, there are astounding movies that are small, that may only
Mm.
play for a week or two at your local art house, but they are honestly the most interesting, thoughtful, and creative, and ambitious, and outside the box thinking. And it's where it's where all the passion is, honestly, and it's so exciting to be able to sort of support it, and with what we're doing, and then with Greg Lemley.
Yeah, and it's funny because movies in the beginning, because when movies first came out, they weren't considered art. They were just considered, I think, something where you would just see a moving picture capture a train go by or something like that, as the first movie that ever came out did. Uh, so what do you or why do you think movies were not considered art at the time, and it took so long for it to be considered that?
Yeah, I mean, we did a really interesting interview with a historian and a professor named Ross Melnick,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about the history of Art House because it is just now celebrating its 100th anniversary. It's from
Wow.
1924. Give or take, it's kind of right around now, and the definition of Art House has changed, and the ability to kind of figure out, you know where it is, and what is kind of the poster child for it has also changed. If for any of your listeners who are interested, I think it's a great spot to land because he's so smart and informed, and it's such a great interview that he gave. But the Art House has I guess always sort of been an attempt to try and do something a little different, some to try to do something outside of the mainstream. David Lynch, of course, is the perfect poster child of that. By the way, I just watched You Don't Know Jack. I guess it's his short
Mm-hmm.
or something. It's like
Yeah, yeah. About Jack Nance. Yeah.
yeah. You can find that. I guess I think it was on Amazon Prime, but it's so great. It's just fantastic and weird, and it leaves you, it's kind of wondering and curious and would never be made with a studio. It is creative and dynamic. And look, this medium that we get to work in, that is film, is is so thrilling, and it's constantly reinventing itself. But if you notice, the people who are now directing the Marvel films generally came up, bubbled up out of the indie world
Mm.
with a point of view and a perspective, and then they got sort of shepherded over to kind of making these big budget films. But it's the creative force that comes out of these smaller films and out of these smaller theaters that really brings so much life to what we love about seeing movies.
Yeah, and the atmosphere around the whole art house world has kind of changed with the advent of streaming. How do you think streaming has affected the art house experience?
Look, streaming's not going anywhere, and it's great that it's out there. And there are films that I know that I can see there that it's helpful because I can't get out every single night. Um, Anytime I go to a theater though and see a movie, I'm reminded that that's how this art form was defined to be. It's being, in real estate. That's just for the viewing and the experience of this movie. It's being in front of a screen that's significantly larger than you. I don't care how big your television is, a big screen in a dark room with no interruptions, and where you get to gather with other people so that you sort of, the laughs, the cries, the sighs, the emotion is all amplified by the group and the gathering. We're also, I believe, I mean, there you are in a bar and you get to kind of gather with people, but we're all there's a lot of chronic loneliness going on out there. And so finding places, gathering points where you can connect with people, where you can come in to a movie like this and come in as strangers and leave as friends, there's an opportunity there to kind of really connect. And I think that's important. That's important for us. So look, streaming is great. It's obviously not going anywhere, and it gives us access to all sorts of things. But these small art houses are really um, they're they hold what is the essence of the cinematic treasures. They really are the doorway to what we love. And there's no filmmaker who doesn't want to be seen on a big screen with an audience. I mean, isn't it wonderful that you can make it and you can, finish it and it's sitting there on your hard drive, but it doesn't really feel like a movie until it
Mm-mm.
actually is, an audience has gathered for it in one place, and there's that space between the screen and the seats that
Yeah.
somehow where the magic happens. And that's where the dynamic and the excitement happens, and that's where cinema is thrilling.
Yeah. Do you think audiences are more engaged with the art house these days because it's more sort of, I guess you could say, accessible than it was before? Or do you think that it's kind of dwindling away because it's so accessible?
I don't know if I'd say either of those. I mean, I think that I mean we all know that COVID obviously shut down all sorts of venues, and closed all sorts of theaters. That is live theaters and music venues and everything else. We are now 4 or 5 years out from that, and we are seeing many more people come back. But we're also seeing it's not just an older generation of people coming to Art House, but sort of the new kind of younger, hipper, cooler Gen Z or college age kids who are essentially going like, oh man, I'm sick and tired of kind of the standard, fare.
Mm.
What else is there? And they're finding their way there, which is really cool and exciting to see. I because I mean, I'm an actor. I've been an actor my whole life. I have worked in film and television and theater, and I get access to have wonderful experiences with the people that I get to work with. But these days I've been able to watch a lot of movies because I'm
Mm.
obviously watching them in preparation, probably similar to you as a critic, where you get to watch a lot of movies. And I'm just knocked out, bowled over by what I'm seeing and the creativity and the vision that's coming through. So there's an exploding energy in the art house world, certainly from the filmmakers. And I think more and more people are sort of seeing that and discovering it. And we're there to try and champion that and continue to invite more people to come.
Yeah, and it's fun when people think about movies a lot. They like to tie it to box office numbers. Why do you think people tie box office numbers to a movie's worth on more of a popular scale, I guess you could say?
There was something that happened with Entertainment Tonight so many years ago, whenever it was, 30 years ago, where it just became like kind of like scores, like kind of sports scores, who won the
Yeah,
weekend, whether something won for the weekend, does that mean that it's a good movie? I don't think so. I mean, I've seen some of the movies that have made all the gajillions of dollars, and they're not great movies. They're fun, but they're maybe more popcorn movies. But at the end of the day, if I guess if you're looking for something outside standard fare, if you're looking for things that are sort of creative and different, the art house is where it's at.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, so how did you get involved you said you mentioned you were an actor. How did you get involved in the television industry and I guess outside of it with the or not television, but the film and television industry, and then kind of outside of it with what you're doing now?
I mean, I've been an actor since I was four. I shot Risky Business in Chicago when I was there.
Oh,
I've done lots of movies, Independence Day, Pearl Harbor, my science project, Vision Quest, just recently in The Exorcist. And I'm a working actor. I've been a working actor my whole life. I started making films about 15 years ago, and I won an Emmy and done a bunch of work. And then I made this feature doc, which is the one about, only in theaters, which is this one that, again, introduced me to the Lemley family and to this incredible story. Um, I, had never aspired to be a podcaster. I'm certainly not doing it for any other reason other than the fact is that I really care about the films. I care about the theaters, and I really know what it's like firsthand to be a filmmaker and be sort of frustrated with how little access there is to being able to be heard. So that's what we're trying to do is to kind of really take all of our energy and sort of really help lift people up, as it were, as they open their movies.
yeah, yeah. It's a great way to kind of stay connected to everyone. Do you have like a favorite art house film that you draw people to who may be curious about the art house? Like someone's like, "Oh, art movies, aren't those just like weird French films?" Blah, 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 blah. Like, how do you actually get someone to be interested and go, "Oh, okay, I actually want to see these movies now."
Well, I mean,
Who?
David Lynch is a great example. I mean, just
Yeah.
because he's so of the moment. But I mean, there's an incredible movie right now called I'm Still Here that's opening in theaters. Walter
Mm-hmm.
Salles, great movie. We're interviewing him this week, the director of that. There's a beautiful movie called Every Little Thing that's a documentary about hummingbirds, but so much more. There's another beautiful movie called Vermilio that's currently in theaters, and that's a gorgeous film that's shortlisted for an Oscar and is about a little village in the Italian Alps. There's something for everyone, and more often than not, what we're trying to do is, I guess, if you don't know what to watch or if you don't know what's out there, come visit the channel, I guess, and find out what kinds of movies we're focusing on, and see if some of those speak to you, because there's an awful lot of movies out there that are just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of came back from COVID and we're still sort of seeing the effects of it when it comes to people going to the theater. How do you think COVID affected the theatrical experience and how it's still affecting it?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people sort of obviously got frightened, didn't want to be in crowds, so they kind of
Yeah.
stopped going. I think what happened also is that the an older audience, which had been sort of associated with going to art house, had been focused on staying home, staying safe, and then I think people got out of the habit. But again, box office numbers have been climbing. People have been sort of, we know that people want to get out of their house. Even with gajillion channels at home, an opportunity to be able to kind of go see a movie in a theater is actually a fun thing, and that's what we've all been kind of focused on. So I think that with some coaxing and reminding and kind of the ability to kind of just sort of wander back into a theater, if you haven't been to one in a while, that you'll get to sort of discover like, oh wow, I love this is great.
Hmm.
It's such a relatively inexpensive way to have kind of like a mental vacation. You go into a theater, everything's unplugged, you just fall into the story, and then you sort of wander back into your day, and something's been reset in you. Your brain has just been recalibrated, and everything just feels a little easier. There's something wonderful, magical about going to movies and being in movies, seeing movies in theaters.
Yeah. So how do you think sites like Rotten Tomatoes affect an audience's perception of a movie and also the individuality of a critic? Because everyone's like, oh, this movie is 50%. That means that it's not good. I don't want to see it. Or, oh, this movie has 90%. It must be amazing. When really, a lot of times, I've ended up liking the movies that got the mixed reaction because those seem to do sort of the most amount of work rather than the movie that gets like 100% and then I see it and I go, that didn't seem like 100% kind of movie. I think it goes back to sports where it's like, oh, you're calculating it by numbers and by statistics rather than by the film itself.
Yeah, no, I'm with you totally. I mean, I think, people need to be curious. People need to be more curious than just Rotten Tomatoes and look for what's out there because there's so much wonderful stuff that's out there. And Rotten Tomatoes is kind of the quick and fast, cheap and easy kind of way to kind of make a decision. But I think if you dig a little deeper, you can find that there's an awful lot more there than initially meets the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give someone who wants to make an art house film and have it be seen, but not just be seen online? Like they actually want to have their movie be shown in the theater where they can get butts and seats and people actually interacting with the film, with their friends.
It's a really intense process of there's four mountains, right? There's the one which is the pre-production, which is sort of, creating the film. Then there's the actual production, which is invariably extremely difficult and will take you to your knees. Then there's the post-production, then
Yeah.
which will also cripple you and give you agita, and then the final one is basically the marketing. I,
Mm,
I would say I would encourage people to go listen to the interview that we did with the producer of Hundreds of Beavers
mm.
about this. I think one of the most important things is marketing to start with number four as number one. Really start as you begin to conceive your project, really start thinking from a marketing point of view so that you can sort of weave that through all steps so that when you get to the marketing stage, you're not sort of bowled over.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what do you want people to take away from your show when they see it?
Yeah, I mean, I just really want people to sort of be interested, curious. We want people to consider, going to see these movies in theaters, obviously anywhere in the US, that is art houses around the country. Maybe you'll miss it at the art house, but then maybe you'll find it when it comes back around on ancillary. But these are extended conversations with really interesting filmmakers talking about the creative process and again, the kind of the extraordinary journey to kind of make a movie and again oftentimes decades of their lives to do so. So there's something very moving about that and I if people are interested in the creative process, if people are interested in movies, people are interested in art house film and or seeing films that are created by people who are doing extraordinary things, come find us. It's inside the art house.
Absolutely. And I guess I'll just have one more question for you. How do you think the art house will evolve over the years? I know you're not a psychic, but if you were to guess, like what do you think the trajectory of it is?
Again, the people that I've spoken to from as history kind of, in the cycles of it, I would imagine that young people would begin to kind of really begin to remember that this is actually like, oh, wow, this is where all the cool kids are. And that we'll have that kind of rush again, generationally of younger people coming back to something that feels substantial and interesting and different and has vision and isn't just sort of pablum and or the same thing that we've seen 100 times. They talk about mid TV. There's also mid movies. Look, I love all sorts of movies. I love some mid movies, but as a kind of a staple, if you want to get your teeth into something that's a little juicier, I think the younger generation will begin to remember and or discover that this is where it's at, and that's where I see it going.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Raphael Sbarge, thank you so much for coming on. If you
Thanks.
guys want to check out his show, go to Inside the Art House. You could probably Google that and it'll pop up. You can find it on YouTube. That's how I found it on Inside the Art House. Ralph, is there anything you want to depart with us before we leave you to it?
No, Mike, this thanks for the opportunity to, to connect with your folks and I appreciate the work you do as a film critic and I love Chicago. So it's great to be able to say hi, even just virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll see you in Chicago sometime.
That sounds
All
great. All right.
right. Well,
Thanks.
thanks a lot, folks. And if you like what you saw, remember to go to YPA Reviews. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. All right. Thanks a lot,
All right.
folks.